Lloyd, Lloyd, Hellman, Hellman.
What is your birthday?
June 11th. That's tomorrow.
Wow, happy birthday.
1930.
One year after the Great Depression.
As a matter of fact, I contend that I was conceived 6 months before that period of time, was on the crash. I don't know if it's true, but I say that anyway.
So you are the Great Depression baby.
Yes.
Where were you born?
In Kansas City, Missouri.
And tell me about your family when you were growing up, your parents and your siblings.
Yes, my father, Morton Hellman, was a paper hanger, and my favorite parent, and my mother, who I also loved, Bertha, was a working woman after a few years at Harsfeld's in Kansas City, a very fancy store.
What about siblings?
I had a brother 7 years older than I, and he's gone now. He died. He was a baker, and a very fine baker. Delicious stuff.
So do you have a plan for birthday tomorrow?
Just going to dinner with the family.
Family. So
My son and his wife and his 2 children live here in Johnson County, and my daughter lives in Chicago.
is she coming?
No,
No.
not this time.
Yeah, phone.
This is the 87th year. And I leave a little aphasia. I have trouble with words sometimes, but if I can have a long time, I can come up with a word actually, but the aphasia bothers me sometimes.
87 years old. You look young and you have a longevity. So
Yes, that's true.
and those are the things that we cannot get away from it. So don't worry about it. Tell me, when did you graduate high school and what high school did you graduate?
Yes, I graduated from Paseo High School in Kansas City, Missouri.
PA.
SEO.
Mm-hmm.
And what other question was there?
When? When did you graduate?
Yes, in 1948.
And
I went to the University of Missouri after high school.
what did you study?
Business degree. I had accounting, some mathematics, economics. I had some very fine economics teachers. I went to the University of Missouri for the junior and senior year, my first freshman and sophomore year were at junior college in Kansas City, Missouri. An excellent college. Junior college was a very fine school here, and the price was $35 a semester.
That's it?
That's it.
So let me ask this question. Did you learn anything about Korea from your school, high school?
No,
School education, even in Missouri, University of Missouri, did you learn anything?
about Korea?
Yeah,
No.
not at all.
Well, yes, we were listening to the radio on Sunday night in my fraternity house because we were going to get drafted. And we knew what was happening in Korea, in Missouri in 1950. 50 and 51, the war was pretty bad at that time.
And
I had an exemption for those 2 years while I was in Missouri while the war was on. And I went to Korea just the month after the war had stopped, the shooting had stopped.
so did you actually graduate the University of Missouri?
Yes,
When did you graduate?
1951.
And so that your draft has been delayed, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. And after you graduate, what did you do?
I was draftable at that time, and I couldn't get a job after I was graduated from the University of Missouri. And so I just continued to do my high school and college job selling shoes in Kansas City.
So that was your own business?
No, that's just working for the place where my mother worked at Harsfeld, a very fancy, big-time shoe store.
Was that the influence of Great Depression still, that you were not able to get a job even though you have a college degree?
No, that wasn't my problem. My problem was I was going to get drafted any day now after graduating and losing my exemption. So nobody wanted to train me for anything, so I just continued to do what I could do, which was selling shoes, and it was a pretty good pay, not too bad, for the period of time until I was drafted in December 10th of 1951. So I was graduated in June, and 6 months later I was drafted into the Marine Corps, which nobody understood that.
Why is that? Why you don't understand?
Because the Marine Corps did not draft
Oh, they all volunteer, right?
volunteers, but the chosen reservoir was manned. The Army couldn't stop the North Koreans. The Marine Corps could. And that's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love the Marine Corps, and I admit that, but I didn't expect to get drafted into the Marine Corps because they never drafted in their entire history, except for about 3 or 4 months in December and January, December 51, January 52.
During the World War II, you were in the middle school and some of the end of the elementary school, right?
I'm sorry?
During the World War II, you were in the middle school, right?
I was too young.
Yeah, too young. But my question is, during the World War II, all nations mobilized to support
Yes.
the World War II, right?
Yes.
Korean War still has known as forgotten war. And not many people really was keenly aware of the war at the time during the war, Korean War, right? How do you contrast between the national situation for World War II and the Korean War?
Well, everybody, my brother was in the Second World War. He was had a bad eye, but yet they needed what he could do. He was here's aphasia.
Take your time, sir.
He had a medical background, He had a lot of medical background and a very bright fellow. And so they drafted him in the Second World War as not A1, but something less, and put him in the military, in the medical corps. And they sent him to Europe very shortly after the invasion of the
Normandy?
I'm sorry?
Normandy?
Normandy? I don't hear it.
Normandy. Invasion of Normandy?
Yes, yes, you're right. Very shortly after Normandy, why he was on the beach very shortly after the invasion, because he was
Medical?
medical.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, why is it forgotten that the Korean War compared to World War II?
Oh, well, the number of people, just, it was enormous. Korean War was not as, there was also an understanding that when the U.S. sent the Marine Corps, first of all, the drive down the Korean Peninsula was not being stopped by the Korean, South Korean, or the Army. There was no stopping them, apparently, until the Marine Corps went in there and stopped them in the
middle.
Well, not even the middle, clear down to the Pusan perimeter. And the Marine Corps stopped that.
Yep.
I mean, that was happening while I was still at University of Missouri. I wasn't in the Marine Corps. I wasn't in the fighting at that time. And then when I was drafted, they stopped the war after 1 year while I was in training in the Marine Corps. And then when I went to the Korean Peninsula, I was put in the perimeter, the Pusan perimeter. And that's where I stayed because the shooting had stopped. I was an air controller, and a intercept air controller, which I had learned in the year I was in the Marine Corps in the States.
So where did you go to get the basic training?
I went to California, to
San Diego?
San Diego, to boot camp.
When?
December 11th, 1951, the last draft before they were going to delay until 1952.
So when did you leave to Korea? From where?
Yes, from California, because I trained in, I can't think of that right now. I trained in California just north of San Diego.
Pendleton?
No, not Pendleton, but just north of that, where there was a air control training center. I can't think of the name of the town anymore. Maybe you can help me.
So when did you leave?
Oh, in September of 1952.
Wow, so you were there for a long time.
Yes. Well, first, you understand, I was drafted and I was sent to San Diego boot camp, and I was the right guide there's a great story here, if you're interested.
Yes, please.
When I got out of the University of Missouri, I went around, I was a graduate now, and I was trying to get a commission in the Army, in the Navy, but not in the Marine Corps. I didn't want that. Kansas City people didn't know about the Marine Corps. They're known in California, they're known in Boston, but Kansas City people thought the Marine Corps was, well, you'll get killed there, because they're big fighters. And so I went to the Navy to see if I could get a commission. I was a graduate now, and they wouldn't let me apply for a line commission because I didn't have mathematics that you need for driving ships. But they would let me apply for a supply commission, and I had all the background for the supply commission. And as I'm working in the shoe store, I'm getting letters from the Navy saying, your application for commission is now step 2, step 4, step 7, whatever was happening. And I'm thinking I'm going to get a commission here any day now. And I was drafted on December 3rd. And I took that information down to the Navy and said, hey, can you get my supply commission that's coming any day now? Can you stop this draft notice? And they called me on the phone and said, yes, we've stopped your draft. But for December the 10th, I got another greeting, as they're called. And I took it down to the Navy and I said, can you get this stopped? You did it last week. And they said, we'll see. And they called me and said, no, we can't stop this when you're going. So we heard, we heard that they were drafting to the Marine Corps. And we heard the week before, they drafted half of the class here in Kansas City to the Marine Corps and half to the Army. And a friend of mine who was in college with me was drafted as well. And so we decided that, well, if we're going to be drafted to the Marine Corps, we might as well stand together. So we stood in the countdown, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. We stood with somebody in between us, and we were counted down. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. We were number ones. And we were told, number 1, take 1 step forward. You are drafted in the United States Marine Corps. Number 2, take 1 step forward. You also are drafted into the Marine Corps. So the whole people who were drafted on December 10th were drafted into the Marine Corps. I was sent on the train to San Diego, and a friend of mine who was a Marine told me, if you get off the bus in San Diego, if you stand in the middle and the drill instructor doesn't hardly know your name, even when you're finished, you've succeeded. So I get off the bus and I'm standing in the very, very middle. And a Marine up on the balcony. Calls down, Lloyd Hellman. Lloyd Hellman. I put my hand up, he says, call your mother. Well, you know how the Marine Corps is about your mother. So I call my mother and she says, the day after you went to the Marines, you got your commission to the Navy came in. So you're supposed to go to your commanding officer, the Navy says, and the Navy and the Marines is part of the Navy system, and ask them to be released to go to the Navy. So I did, and they sent me to around the San Diego boot camp, and they sent me to the top general in the Marine Corps in San Diego, and his adjutant said, you probably have to apply for a Marine commission. And if you don't get that, we'll let you out to accept the Naval Commission. So, you see, but go back to duty, and I'll see how that is. But he didn't do anything, and of course, he was right. I had to apply for a Marine Commission first, and if I get that, that's fine, but if not, they'll let me out. So.
But nothing happened.
No, oh no, I was just, well, but my drill instructor knew that I received a commission already. So he made me the right guide, the boot leader, so to speak.
So that's how your life has been decided.
Yes.
So where did you arrive in Korea, and when did you arrive in Korea?
In September, I don't know the exact date, in September 1952. Mm-hmm. And I stayed in Korea for 1 year.
Where did you arrive? Incheon?
No.
Busan?
No.
Pohang?
I'm sorry?
Pohang? Where did you landed in Korea?
At the airfield where I was going to drive up about 8 miles to the radar station. So I was sent, and
Is it Gimpo or Gimhae?
King 3 is all I know.
K3.
K3,
Okay.
King 3. That was the airfield that our planes were taking off from, and I'm now stationed out on the edge there, 8 miles away, so that our radar can pick them up and control them throughout the entire northern Korea.
So what was your unit and what was your rank?
I was a second lieutenant.
Second lieutenant?
Yes.
So you were commissioned?
Yes.
Ah.
I got out of the Marine Corps and was sent to South Carolina airfield, where I was learning to be. No, that's not true. I went to the field. Oh boy, this was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. I'm sorry to ask that question. So you were second lieutenant, and what was your unit?
King 3. Oh boy.
First Marine?
Oh, I'm sorry.
First Marine?
No, 3rd Marines. Third Marine Air.
Third Regiment.
No, I was connected to the airplanes.
So what is your...
Well, the number 3 was the field.
Okay.
And the airplanes, fighters.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, it took 8 weeks in boot camp.
Yeah.
Then I was sent to South Carolina Airfield,
Yeah.
where I was supposed to be repairing radar, but my sergeant major knew that I could type, so he took me for his staff, and I was a PFC, then I was a corporal, then I made my own application for commission at Quantico, and I was sent to the commission work that lasted only 3 weeks, and I got a commission, a second lieutenant's commission at Quantico.
When?
About 8 or 9 months after I was in the Marine Corps. So it was in 1952.
No. You were commissioned in 1953, right?
No.
52? You sure?
Yeah, sure. That it was only 8 months that I was in the Marine Corps. In 51 into 52, 8 months. Now I've got a second lieutenant's commission.
But you told me that you left to Korea September 1953.
That's correct.
So what did you do after you got commissioned as a second lieutenant?
Then I went to California to learn to be an intercept controller, an air controller.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Hawaii for 3 weeks to learn to control jets. And
Now it makes sense.
yes,
Yes, yes. So now you came to Korea as an intercept air controller.
yes,
So you work with the radar
that's correct.
and you guided the
Aircraft.
pilots
Yes.
to intercept the enemy aircraft.
Yes.
Now we are in the right path. Okay, so tell me about the typical day of your duties. What did you do? When did you wake up and what did you do? Tell me the details.
Well, there was no shooting in our area. It was down on the southeast portion, but our radar searches clear up to the 38th parallel.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I wake up and I've got a 4-hour service as an air controller, when air pilots take off, they're controlled by somebody else at the field. Then when they come up to us, they call in and say, here we are, we're going to go up to the 38th parallel and run across there, and that's all they did was run across there. And I would not control them up there because it's pretty far and it's not a really very good radar. Then they would come back and they would call in to me, and I would control them down to the King 3 airport and put them on the ground, almost on the ground.
That was after the war, right?
After the war, after the shooting, not
Af-
after the war, but after the shooting. The North Koreans are standing there threatening, but not doing anything.
After the ceasefire.
Yes.
And tell me about the enemy air force. How
Ah, okay.
How often did you see, and how many aircraft, and what kind of aircraft?
None. They had no bombers that I know of. They had jets. I used to know the names and all. MiGs. We could not see the MiGs running across 38th parallel, but you have to understand, even if I'd have been there in the shooting, the MiGs would never come down below the 38th parallel because they're manned by either Russians or Chinese, and they don't want to be shot down in our area. So they don't come down here. They really didn't have adequate attack planes, but they didn't have attack pilots. North Koreans were not flying their ships, planes at that time.
So it was either Soviet Union or China.
Chinese pilot. So
China didn't have much.
I wasn't there at that time,
right?
But I knew that they really weren't going to be making sorties in here.
Right. So basically, Kim Il-sung, the head of the North Korea, told everybody that we were defeated because we lack of air force power. That's what he said. North Korea was defeated.
It's true.
So your witness telling us that there are not many North Korean or Russian aircrafts in
but I wasn't there at that time.
But when you were there, did you see?
There's no intercepts.
No enemy aircraft, right?
I was mostly interested in aircraft coming across from Japan to Korea, and once in a while they weren't squawking. They didn't have a code. They were flying in with no squawks, is what we call them. 1, 2, 3, or 4.
So no enemy aircraft at all?
Never saw one.
So you didn't have much things to do, actually?
No.
Right?
We were aiding our aircraft. We were always practicing low fuel letdowns. If they had been fighting up there, they would be coming back without much gas. And our idea was to keep them up at about 30 to 40,000 feet, and then dropping them down over the ocean and over the bay, right into, so that they would save gas. So we were always working on low fuel letdowns. That's mostly what we. But one Christmas Eve of
53.
I'm on duty. I'm a Jewish guy, so I'm serving on helping my Christian kids have a Christmas, and there's a plane squawking 4 squawks. That's emergency. And I get a hold of them and I say, and I go up on the guard channel, the general aircraft channel, and I said, aircraft squawking, emergency, what can I do for you? And it's 2 doctors that are up there getting their flight skins. You know flight skins? Doctors that fly they're special doctors, and they get more money if they fly. So they have to fly every month. So they were up there 25th of the month, getting their flight skins, getting their extra pay. And their aircraft is acting up. So anyway, they couldn't, they were squawking emergency, and they couldn't control their plane because they didn't have anyway,
Yeah.
they were Air Force guys, and K2 is about 60 miles over here. So they wanted to get a steer over, so I made a steer over there, and then lowered them down as low as I dare because of mountains, etc. And they couldn't see their field. So I steered them back to K3, which is about 60 miles.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean they cannot see it?
I'm sorry?
There is a runway there in K2. What? Why couldn't they see it?
Air Force airfield, yes.
Yeah. Why couldn't they see it?
It was cloudy.
Okay.
It was a very bad day, as a matter of fact. I don't know why they went up at that time in that kind of weather, but probably they got one of the worst planes that are around, you know. So anyway, I put them over K3. They couldn't see. And they went out into the ocean. And I didn't want them out in the ocean, so I brought them back, and then their squawks went off. I lost them for about 40 minutes. And then they came up on the scope about that 40 minutes later with the 4 squawks, the emergency, and they're ready to bail out, but they're out in the ocean. Oh, I don't want them over the ocean, so I got them back, and they did bail out, and their plane crashed, but they didn't, and they landed on the dirt and didn't get hurt. And about 20 minutes later, we got a telephone call from the doctors, and thanks a lot for keeping us out in the ocean. So I did something.
Good, very good. So you were second lieutenant.
Yes.
And tell me about the soft side of your service there. Where did you sleep? What did you eat? How was living conditions there?
We had a small base there at the radar, and we had food every day, breakfast if you wanted. We had to man the radar all through the night, so if I had a midnight to 4, I would man that. If I had the 4 to 8, I'd man that. If I had it during the day, I would man that. And I would just take ordinary rotations to fill in what I'm doing. Now, I think I only ran 4 hours a day, but sometimes you'd have to run 8 hours a day, but probably never more than that. And there were, about 8 or 10 controllers, and we all took routines. And then we had a little hut as a bar, and we could have a beer after 4. In the afternoon, I don't drink much, but I would drink a beer. And then I was building an airplane because I had nothing to do other than just the 4 or 8 hour shift. And then we had other jobs. Sometimes I was at the lieutenant. Me,
Have you been back to Korea?
no,
No.
I've not.
Hmm.
I've not been to Japan either again.
So tell me about Korea you saw in 1954. How was it?
We were out at Koreungpo. I think that's a very tiny place on the ocean, in the south.
구룡포.
Koreungpo.
Yes. Yes. And
And if I would drive into the air base, we drive through their little town, and they would hang fish on the lines.
yeah.
And they didn't wave at us, and we didn't wave at them. I don't know. I'm not sure it was a good thing that they liked us there. I don't know.
Hmm.
And we had 2 waitresses that would serve the officers meals, and I had a houseboy that would take care of our Kang was his name. We had a good time with Kang. He was a nice kid.
What do you mean good time? What kind?
Well, I mean, he was fun. We kid him and, all kinds of that. Just,
He kicked you too?
huh?
He kicked you too?
I'm sorry.
He kicked you too?
Kiss me?
No, kid you.
Oh, I don't think his English was good enough for that. But he was a bright kid. And
Isn't that kind of sad that these little children had to work to survive?
I guess so.
Right?
He was not a little kid. He was 16, 17, 18.
Oh, I see.
I would say.
So he was teenager.
Yeah, I would say so.
So
And he would heat water in a tub of some sort and walk it up a ladder and pour it in, and that would give us a shower.
oh boy.
The officers lived in a Quonset hut. In the half, 4 officers. In the next half, 4 officers. And we'd have a shower. And he would work. He would work.
He was desperate, I think, right? To make any money.
Well, he needed the
To
money.
survive, yes.
I think he was paid reasonably. I don't know. We paid what we were told.
Had you chance to go to Seoul or any other big city while you were there?
Yes,
What? Where?
I went to Seoul.
What did you
Once.
see? Give me the detailed description of Seoul you saw.
Yes. Seoul was a Korean city, town, but no buildings of any size except the USPX was the biggest building in Seoul. I saw Seoul when President Eisenhower went there, and it knocked my hat off. There were roads, there were buildings. When I was at home in Kansas City, no such thing when I was in Korea in 1953, 4. I saw nothing but Korean-looking huts in Seoul, but no big buildings except the PX. Now, if there were other buildings, I didn't see them.
Do you know today's Korea?
I'm sorry?
Today's Korea.
Yes.
Modern Korea.
Oh, my heavens, I do. Oh, it's marvelous roadways, beautiful concrete buildings, glass, the most constructed apartments, it looks like to me. It's a beautiful place, and it must be many people living there. But the roads, I love the way they run through the town.
So what do you think about this whole transformation, the Korea you saw in 1953 and 4, and now? What a transformation. What do you think about that?
I think it's a fantastic thing. I think they're I can't imagine what the heck the North Korean leader is thinking about. What kind of guy is he? It makes no sense at all. And the only thing that he can do if he wants to create some trouble is to kill people. I don't know what else he could do. And I see his war-making capabilities. It's terrible. I forgot to tell you. The last 2 months in Korea, I went up to the 38th parallel to run a brand new method of radar which would control bombers across the 38th parallel and run a tracker across a large table was what we used. And we ran that tracker, and that tracked by radar bombers, and we could bomb any roadway or other places across the enemy's line, and we could do blind bombing. Mm-hmm. That was new stuff. There was also, at that time, up on that 38th parallel, a German radar that was, we weren't even allowed to go over to look at it. I did it one day just because I couldn't stand it anymore. That was, they were checking all the movement across the line.
So, what do you think is the legacy of the Korean War?
Yes.
And your legacy, what is it?
Well, number one, the Marine Corps, honest to God, not the Army, the Marine Corps saved the South Korean people. Now, resetting that line was what we needed to do. Whether we should have gone farther, I don't have a feeling. I think that's right, but because that's what the government said. And I think we've done something there. When I think of holding the line at the line in the southeast, that was great. That was great doings. Other than that, I don't think the Air Force, after the shooting, had anything to do, and I don't think, I think we were able to hold the 38th parallel, and that was a good thing. And I don't think they should have been allowed to. Well, I mean, that's what we had to do, I guess, but...
Thanks to the U.S. Marine and U.S. military, South Korea is now 11th largest economy in the world, ranked number 11.
Well, I mean, it's bigger than Chicago, the way it operates. I can't get over when I did see the first time when Eisenhower went there, and the TV cameras went with him.
You know, you're talking about Eisenhower. Now we're talking about 21st century, and the Korea and the capital city of Seoul. You're not going to believe that. So that is your legacy.
Well, it was going. It wasn't stopping. It was just, well, I can't. When I saw that, that was quick. That was an enormous, and the people came in to Seoul. That was a fantastic city. No question about it.
Yep.
You live there?
Yes, I used to live there.
Yeah.
So we want to, that's why we are doing this, to let our younger generation know about your legacy. The Korea and Seoul City in 1950 and right now. It's incomparable. It's beyond our imagination. But our school textbook doesn't tell much about it. So that's why we are doing this. And I want to thank you for your story, okay, and your service.
Thank you.
And it was a great pleasure to meet you and to be able to listen from you. I wish we have more time, but we have 1 hour. And thank you again.
You're welcome.